So, hi, I'm Joshua Ralph. I'm an eco-artist, currently living in South Vancouver. Run around doing a lot of workshops involving invasive species and using them for art purposes primarily. What we're here to do today is to make one of these bird nesting cages. So birds, it's their nesting time. They're looking for material. We've got some animal fur in here along with some invasive reed canary grass and some Himalayan blackberry to form the cage, as well as some bindweed that just kind of holds it all together. Hangs up nice like this. Birds come along, grab some of the fluff for their nests. Yeah, it helps them build a nest. To start, we've each should have a knife. Yep. And yeah, I think we can just go for it. Probably start with about 4 or 5 sticks. I'll go into the measurements in a bit, but for the first part, it's probably just best to, yeah, just start with shaving them down because we're gonna be using quite a bit of sticks for these. So as you can see, these sticks are kind of more from like dead plant material. We'd be focusing on this. This was grabbed from a plant just a couple weeks ago. But you'd want to avoid, for this project, just newer shoots. You have the issue where it could be growing mold. It still has water flowing through it and stuff. So you can just find these attached to any old blackberry plant. Sometimes it's just older growth that had died for some reason. I know on my own with the larger shoots that come up, you can dry it on your own. It takes about 9 months. Not super familiar with how long these would take to dry, probably a lot shorter.
So these were already dried?
These were pre-dried, yeah. I had grabbed them from the plant like that.
What I hear is a blackberry has 2-year life cycle. So the first year it's like the flowering, and then the second year they make the berries, and then the canes die, and then it actually makes a new one from the root after that. So you'll often see like a big area of just dried canes, and then they finish their 2-year life cycle. They'll die off and then new ones come up.
I've heard that as well. I'm not super familiar with their life cycle. Know a little bit more about their growth cycle when they sprout their canes. So how to identify the Himalayan blackberry here is normally the shoots are quite a bit larger than this. We're just using the small shoots in this case because it's easier to build a cage with. But you'll notice it kind of has, it's not quite a round cane, and you'll see that across the board for all the Himalayan blackberries. Especially when you hold it, you can kind of feel it's a bit like hexagonal. Yeah. Yeah, definitely it's got the spines on it. That's definitely a key diagnostic feature. Very broad leaves for the most part, and it will generally have 5 points. When you flip them over, very white underneath. As well on the central leaf vein. So the main part, when you think about a leaf, how there's the vein trailing up the middle. On the underside, it has spines as well. So not generally to find that on any other plant within Lower Mainland. So they come from Armenia, and they were brought over in, I believe it was the 1880s, definitely late 1800s. Yeah, okay. It was either 1880s or 1890s. So 1880s was brought over by the same guy who invented the plum cot, and he was a fruit farmer trying to develop different fruits to sell on the market. What really brought him to this species of blackberry from Armenia was that the berries are quite large and they're quite tasty. I'll give him that.
He called them the Himalayan giants because they were
they are huge.
And they were called Himalayan because it was a time of like sharing seeds across different countries, and he got a shipment of seeds from India, from one of the seed traders in India, and so he just called them Himalayan giant. He mistakenly thinking they came from India.
I didn't know the reason for the name. Okay, that's cool, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's not actually from the Himalayas.
No.
It was misnamed. That wasn't the original origin of the plant.
Yes, they're brought over initially to California and just sort of made their way up along the coast, up north here. Really just grow, along the coast.
They survived really well in like Washington State, and then they did really well in that kind of temperate climate, I guess. Although native blackberries are more delicious.
Yes.
They're really delicious. If you have the native ones trail along the ground, they're called trailing blackberry, and the berries taste like berry Skittles. They're like sweet candy flavored berries. Like, it's so delicious if you find them. They're harder to find because they don't make big thickets. They just kind of trail
you do have to look for
along.
them.
Yeah, you have to know where to look. They are in the local trails here. There are areas I know where you can find the native blackberry. Not as prolific as and the native ones have a male and female plant. So you might see a male plant and it doesn't fruit. So you might see a bunch of male plants and you're like, there's no berries on here. You have to find the female plant.
So I did when I was grabbing these branches over the past couple months here, kind of try to focus on branches that are a bit more streamlined, because a lot of times with blackberry, they'll kind of be all scraggly and all over the place. But I don't think the birds care, to be honest. Probably doesn't matter to the birds. We can go for a couple more minutes here. We're looking good for sticks, but we do need quite a few, and sometimes they can be a bit prone to breaking a couple times, so. That being said, yeah, also with the fruits of the blackberry, another thing to mention is that studies have shown that birds, they will eat the blackberry because it's around, it's kind of everywhere, but they do have a preference towards the native berries. Again, that coevolution probably just tastes a lot better to them. So it can be a food source, but as I know that's quite an often argument for not removing the blackberry, but at the end of the day, the birds do prefer different food sources, some that are less detrimental to the ecosystem, so. Sweet, yeah, so this is where these papers come in. In order to make it around the size we're going for, a solid size to hang up in a tree, kind of got these measurements here, so we're gonna need 4 of each. This is kind of give or take. The blackberry, sometimes, as you can see, it's a little bit curved. Doesn't matter too much, but as long as you get 4 around 15 centimeters, 14 centimeters, and another 5.5 or so, should be good to go. So with the ones we just shaved down, what we're gonna do is just take the pruners and cut them down to that length, probably working from the 15 centimeter one first to get the nice long ones, and then if you have any scraps at the end, those can get cut down into the smaller pieces.
Okay. So that's a 12 pieces total by the end?
That should be 12 pieces,
okay.
Yeah. The reason for the 14 centimeters versus the 15 centimeters is it looked a bit more aesthetically pleasing when it was a slight rectangle as opposed to a square. This is the really fun part of the workshop. Takes a while. Once you get going though, there's definitely a groove you get into, but going to be a bit of kind of just waiting for glue to dry for a bit. So what you're going to want to do is take one of these sticks that you have that's, yours is going to be measured out. I'm just breaking this one off. And we're essentially going to make a joint, because what we want to do is make 2 of these squares. So this one's already glued together. It's kind of hard to see, but what I found to be the easiest is, I'll probably do this twice, one for each table, is you're gonna cut the corner here so that you have this nice pith on the inside. It's quite soft if you've ever worked with blackberry before. And you're gonna take another piece. It doesn't have to be at a corner, but it can work a little bit better. You kind of stick it in there so that on its own it sticks. And you're essentially, this is what the gloves are for. Yeah, get it at this corner, lather on some glue, and you're kind of just gonna put it aside and let it dry for a couple minutes. You can probably work on the other corner while you're doing the one, but yeah, should work. And just, yeah, let that sit for about 4 minutes or so
okay.
to dry. There is a little bit of a technique to it. It takes a bit. We do have these jars here because I just had a ton laying around, but sometimes, not quite at this stage, I don't think we need it because it can just lay on the table, but it can be easier, especially when you're putting on the little legs, to actually prop them up against something that's standing up. I will note that with the glue, if you put down too much, you might want to go and just kind of scrape it off. A lot of it is just kind of like, you put down glue and you just wait. It's kind of, yeah, it's a bit of an act of patience and trust that the glue will bind in about 4 or 5 minutes. It actually worked a bit better to put a bit of weight on it not quite where it's being glued because you don't want the knife to glue to it, but yeah, to push it together to finish off the square here. So something like that. That's what the jars are for. So this is morning glory, and when it flowers here in a couple months, it'll have these huge white flowers growing off of it. So that's this stuff. Really all this is taken from the stuff that grows above the ground. The roots are kind of, they're a bit thick. They don't work quite as well for this, but we're just using this essentially as a twine that'll wrap around. So it was in the water just to soften it up, because otherwise when it's dry, very hard, it's like really,
Brittle.
yeah, really brittle, kind of like bark-like. So it just sat in the water overnight. This part's pretty easy. And these were just stripped of the leaves. They're just the stems. So morning glory here, you're gonna see it, if you haven't noticed it already, you're gonna see it a lot more because it starts to grow up trees, it grows up other plants. It kind of, as it grows up, it spins, it entwines around other plants. It'll grow up, start going around, the bark, the branches, and it can definitely suffocate a lot of smaller plants that are growing up and baby plants as well. And these can grow, one plant can grow upwards of 60 meters above the surface. I believe its roots can go up to 20 meters. So the roots will just kind of trail along the ground, prop up a bunch of these, and one plant can be absolutely massive, like almost the size of this wall, just with this whole root system and everything that's above ground. I can explain the next step, might as well, because we're all just waiting for the hot glue. So what we're gonna do is take the morning glory. This is basically just big long string. You just need the one to start and kind of keep going at it. So you take your string. I'll untie it, but I'll use her as an example here. So tie it at the corner here. Make sure it's mostly attached. Doesn't need to be super tight. It's still gonna stay in place. And you just kind of go around and you're gonna wanna loop it. Kind of make just a bunch of knots. You don't have to knot it every single time, but yeah. Make sure it's nice and tight so it's more like a cage. Pull that down a bit more. There we go, just like that. And then maybe at the next one, you want to tie it at the corner. You can do another knot here. You can definitely cut these down. Sometimes they're really long and it's just easier actually to go one knot here, one knot here, one knot here. Sometimes it can look just more pleasing if you want to go with a huge one and keep going around and looping it. That's really all we're doing is just try to fill in majority of the cage, enough that it can hold some wool in it is kind of what we're going for. I can bring over, oh, okay, yeah, sure. All good. And then at the end, we're actually gonna wanna keep these tails on. It just makes it easier. Once it's dry for like maybe 10 minutes, we can chop it off. It's gonna look all over the place. It's gonna look really ugly, but once you chop off these tails from the strings, I promise you'll look a lot better. But I can show you the example here. How, it's just kind of tied, especially at the corners here. You can double knot it as well. Kind of go around just to make sure that when you shake it, nothing's coming out. The only thing is I will note, I noticed with the morning glory is it does, once it dries, it gets a little bit, loose. So you do want to make sure that when you're tying it it's quite tight. Otherwise, I'll show you my first example here. I think I put it back in my backpack. This one was not tied very tight and it kind of fell apart. So yeah, when you're doing the knots, really make sure you're reinforcing it because if you see here, knot has a little bit of a loop space left and it just, I mean, the frame still works. I would just have to go through and redo the morning glory, but we got a nice array of rabbit fluff provided by Grace. I did grab some extra sheep wool. The original one I had in these containers that are overflowing, this is alpaca wool. So it doesn't matter too much to the birds, I don't think. I will say that if you guys are refilling this, you want to make sure that you're using animal fur. Some people have been known to use like human hair sometimes, or I know even like lint from the dryer. Two issues with those is that human hair is unfortunately just really coarse and it can wrap around like birds' legs, and especially baby birds are really susceptible to that because all they're doing is really moving around the nest. And it can actually like amputate their legs or their toes if it wraps around, just because it's so thick and it's really hard. So you definitely want to use animal hair if you're providing that to birds. That's usually what they grab. With dryer lint, unless all your clothes are like completely cotton or natural fibers, you're really just supplying them with a bunch of microplastics. So you want to watch out for that too. Don't use dryer lint as easy as dog's fur. Yeah, just any sort of animal fur that isn't human hair or probably not horse hair. Anything that's thick, yeah, you kind of want to avoid that because
and moss you can put in.
that is. I didn't think of that. Yeah. Shoot, no, that's so smart. Yes.
Not bird feathers.
Bird feathers too, those are a bit harder to find. On top of the fur, we also have, I'll also just reinstate that Grace said moss can work. That was, yes, you can gather up moss, they use that as well, throw that in. We just have the two supplies for today being the fur, and this is reed canary grass, one of my favorite plants. So, reed canary grass, this stuff's very dried. I harvested this last year. So it's a really tall grass. It's one of the tallest grasses we get here in Vancouver. It's quite invasive. Once you know how to spot it, you're never gonna be able to unsee it. It grows anywhere from when it flowers about 2 to 3 feet to as tall as 9 to 10 feet. You can definitely spot it if you see a grass that's like 10 feet tall, you know it's reed canary grass. It has very long leaf blades, which tends to be how you would identify it is. If you notice, these ones are a bit dried. You're not really gonna see a grass that has leaves like, what is that, 1/3 of an inch thick? I mean, close to 1/2 an inch. Yeah, really, really thick leaf blades will take over complete fields and makes it really hard for like hawks and falcons to hunt because they'd be used to shorter grasses that don't have leaf blades that completely cover the ground because they're so thick. And yeah, has been known to actually like really negatively impact populations of those birds just because they can't see the mice and they can't see the moles that are hiding under the grass. This stuff tends to grow in a lot of riparian areas as well. It really likes wet. In Vancouver, that doesn't mean so much because we get so much rain, it just grows everywhere. You can find it on the top of hills and like halfway up mountains still just because it is so wet, but does grow a lot by creek sides, and because it's not native, it's not as evolved to the local ecology, which means just it can often tear up the sides of these creeks that are used for salmon spawning. So salmon need very specific plants so that they can hide from predators in the shade, and when Reed canary grass can come in and just outshade everything, grow a lot taller than it, soak up all the sun. Native plants die, their roots of course start to decompose, that all the soil and stuff, sediment falls into the river, and the salmon then aren't provided with the shade that they need. So happens a lot with Reed canary grass just kind of across the province. You can find this in 48 states and every single Canadian province. I'm assuming the 2 states you can't find it in are probably Hawaii and maybe Alaska. That's the best guess I got. I don't know why it's 48 and not the rest, but yes, very invasive. So yeah, birds do use sometimes dried grass for their nesting material. Mostly fluff and yeah, like feathers and stuff, but throw a couple of these in here. This one's got a label. Alpacas in containers and sheep is in the bigger bag.
Oh wow, okay.
Here you go.
These lucky birds, they're gonna get so much choice.
I will say you do kind of want to, just because we are working with animal fur, and if it gets wet, it's gonna kind of condense. You kind of want to make sure it's a little bit out of the way, maybe in a bit of an overhang if you can. We're pretty much done. Yep. It's just tying a simple knot so you can hang it up, and then we're good to go. The sheep wool came from, it's called Sweet Georgia. I grabbed it just because it wasn't already like in a thread form. It's meant for people to thread it themselves, so made it a lot easier for me because the alpaca, I unthreaded that with a dog brush and it took me about 5 hours for a whole, like it was about this size of actual thread yarn of alpaca, and yeah, just Ooh, it was fun. I'm glad I grabbed this though, because this is a lot easier to pull apart. I'll do a demo over here. I think with yours, I'll just do a quick, so you're gonna cut this down. Got the scissors? Ah, there they are. Everything's green. You thread it through the top. Kind of get it even on both sides, which gives you the triangle shape, and you're gonna be pulling out a bit of the fluff as well. Get it like that. You tie a knot on this side. Not actually gonna do it, but I'll just do a quick demo. So a quick knot, kind of loop it around, quick knot. Then give it a knot, tie it at the top, and you're good to go.
And it was an amazing challenge to get the cage together, but really satisfying once we completed it.
Hello, yeah, my name is Catherine, and I just participated in this bird nesting cage workshop with Joshua Ralph. And it was somewhat a little time consuming, about 2 hours. Takes a lot of patience, but the result is absolutely beautiful. So this will provide nesting materials for the birds. And these hang in the trees and